Member Week is here at Lowe's. Don't miss your chance to get up to 40% off hundreds of items like paint, tools, home essentials, and more. Shop our exclusive deals happening in-store and online now through July 18th. Not a rewards member? Join for free today and get ready to save more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. Listen, we got a great interview with an author, Doug Lynam. He's an Enneagram 3 Wing 4. Check this out. He graduated at the top of his class from Marine Corps Officer Candidate School in 1995, then stunned everyone, including his family, by becoming a Benedictine monk. That's right, took a vow of poverty, was a monk for 2 decades, and then left the monastery in 2017 to become a money manager. Now he's got this great new book called Taming Your Money Monster, and it's all about managing money through the lens of the Enneagram. We go through each type today on this show. You're going to love this. You're going to enjoy this interview. You're going to want to get this book. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. And now, without any further ado, here is the man of the hour, Ian Cron.
Hey, Typology Tribe. Welcome back to the podcast where we explore the mystery of the human adventure through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm joined by, of course, Anthony Skinner.
Hey, brother. Looking forward to this one.
This one's going to be rich, man. As you all heard on the intro, we are on today with Doug Lynam, Enneagram 3 with a 4-wing, author of the books From Monk to Money Manager and now Taming Your Money Monster. Doug, welcome to Typology.
Thanks, Ian. I've been a huge fan of you for years, and it's a real honor to be on your show.
Great. Well, listen, your bio is crazy, man. You went from a Marine to being a monk to being a money manager. I mean, that's quite a number of interesting lily pads you have leapt from one to the next. Where did you first learn about the Enneagram and, what it's like to be a 3 with a 4-wing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been friends with Richard Rohr for many years. I know we have a shared friendship in common with him. And, when I became a monk way back in the day, he said the mass at my ordination ceremony. And so I met him first there. And then I really didn't take the Enneagram too seriously until I had to write this book. Richard introduced me to my type. I knew enough to be dangerous and just, some armchair knowledge of it that people kind of I picked up along the way. But it wasn't until I was, I got this book deal and I was trying to figure out, well, how do you bring what would be a framework that would allow me to help teach people to have a healthier ethical relationship to money and use a structure that would transcend religion, politics, and culture. So what would that framework look like? And I spent about 2 years trying to use a system called spiral dynamics and integral theory. And that worked. But when I sent the draft to my publisher, they just took a hard pass on it. They're like, yeah, it works, but it's too complicated. No one's going to read this book. It's not accessible. So I had to kind of take a step back and think, well, okay, what would be another system that would I could pair this to? And I suggested the Enneagram, and my publisher was like, oh, that's the book we want. Enneagram's popular, it'll be a hit. I'm like, all right, well, now I got to become an Enneagram expert. And so then I really took a deep dive into it. And then I have a math science background. So I kind of, as I think people will see in the book, and I hope you get a chance to read it at some point, because it really restructures the Enneagram in some fundamental key ways to really ground it more in childhood developmental psychology and the latest research in neurobiology. So to really give it a strong foundation to explain why it works. Because I think a lot of authors have done an excellent job of explaining how it works, but I've always kind of had this weird, like, well, why does it work? What's the underlying mechanics of it? And so that was something I had to kind of explore and tease out a bit before I could really get my head around it and write a book on the Enneagram. And so that I think I've accomplished that. And it's been a multi-year process. And hopefully, I think readers will find it very entertaining. It's hopefully a humorous book and a lot of great insights packed into it.
Yeah. So, Doug, we had a guest on not long ago, and we were talking about the narratives that we grow up with around the issue of money, right? And the two of us actually both grew up in kind of privileged backgrounds. What were the narratives that you grew up with and how do they relate to the work that you do now?
Yeah, well, like all of us, our adventures begin in childhood that shapes kind of our personality, as you know, through the Enneagram and many other things. But I grew up in a fairly affluent family. My dad was an executive for an oil company, and he's a good man in many, many ways, a loving father. But when my parents divorced when I was about 7 or 8, money became weaponized. It kind of became the tool that my parents used to get back at each other and kind of control each other. And I'd ask my mom for something and she'd say, well, go ask your dad. He's got all the money. And you ask your dad for something and he'd say, well, ask your mom. She's got all my money. And so you just kind of end up not asking for stuff after a while and not me going without a lot of things that even middle-class kids would have, that even in an affluent family were sort of denied because it was just too much of a fight to try to get some basic things. And so I really rebelled against that. My brothers and I, we all did the same thing. I eventually went to the Marines Corps first, graduated top of my class from officer candidate school, thought that would be a great way to impress my father and win his approval and be a manly man who could do manly things. And that didn't work very well. He didn't seem to notice. And I also realized that maybe that wasn't my life's calling. So kind of a bit of a spiritual awakening, and then went off and joined a monastery for 20 years and took a vow of poverty as a great way to annoy my parents and piss them off, but also trying to find God and find deeper meaning in life. But ironically, all my brothers and I, in different ways, ended up taking a vow of poverty. My twin brother ran off and became a homesteader in upstate Vermont, and my older brother ran off and joined a grunge band in Seattle. And we all just kind of thought this whole money capitalistic game was a sham, and tried to get away from it as best we could. And that unfortunately created a lot of suffering for us that was unnecessary. So that was kind of the roots of my journey.
Man, there's a big jump going from being a monk to a money manager, bro. That is a big jump, going from a vow of poverty to managing wealth. That is a big leap. What has been true of you as an Enneagram 3, though, as you look back on the landscape of your life? What has always been true of you, regardless of whether you were a Marine, a monk, or a money manager? Oh,
that unrelenting quest for validation, that need to be validated by others, and looking for that pat in the head, or cross the finish line, win the race, get the gold star, build up my resume. Just that need to achieve things in order to assuage this deep sense of worthlessness that I think all threes have, and it's certainly been a consistent driver across all the domains of my life.
And how is that resolved or not resolved yet in your life?
Well, I mean, it's always going to be there. I mean, as you know, this isn't going to go away, but you can have a healthier relationship to it and put it in its proper place. And so really looking at the childhood wounds that create your Enneagram type, and I think it's been a fun exploration in this book to really lay them out, and like what those wounds are, how they form, and then what path to sort of healing them really is, and what are the virtues that we each need to practice, particularly as a type 3, in order for me to be the healthiest expression of my type. And of course, the answer to that is authenticity. Really is the highest virtue for a 3, is to really live my authentic self, to have the courage to take all the masks off that I'm wearing all the time to please the people around me. And then let my true face come forward with modesty and faith. And then that allows me to get validated for my true self, right? Rather than the false images I'm projecting all the time. And that really kind of assuages that sense of worthlessness, because when I'm being validated for who I really am and not the people pleasing, meeting other people's societal expectations, it tends to allow me to live more fully in love and acceptance, and just feel more grounded in who I really am without. And of course, there's a spiritual dimension to this as well that has to be acknowledged, and that finding that inner spiritual core, that connection to the divine that we all have, and finding that connection internally to the eternal rather than looking for it in the transient and the external.
Beautiful. So, by the way, I didn't mention that, by the way, folks, that the subtitle of Taming Your Money Monster is 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram. And you say in the book that, right, that every type has a correlating money monster.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right? Unpack that for me.
Okay, so I've layered on top of the Enneagram what I call the attachment theory of money, which is very similar to the attachment theory of relationships, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But for those of your audience who aren't, what the attachment theory of money, what I'm doing with it is saying there's basically, we can have a healthy, secure relationship to money, or we can have an unhealthy relationship to it. And it tends to express itself in one of two ways. So there's 2 distinct money monsters for each of the 9 Enneagram types. And one money monster would be the anxious money monster, where you're sort of the Ebenezer Scrooge mentality, where you're too hyper fixated on money. You're living in fear or scarcity mindset, or you're just maybe a little too hyper vigilant about finances in an unhealthy way. So the Gordon Geckos of the world, if you want to think of it like that. Or you can be avoidant, which is how I was. I still am in some ways. Is this knee-jerk reaction against the world of money and finance, where we push money away, we avoid paying our bills, we hate looking at our bank statements, or procrastinate our taxes. All those things that are sort of money avoidant can crop up, and then we can be what I call the jumbled style. We aren't. There's different aspects of our financial life, and so we can be anxious in one area and maybe avoidant in another. So there's what I call the 4 pillars of finance, and the 4 pillars of finance are going to be earning, saving, investing, and giving. And so you could maybe be an anxious earner, but an avoidant saver. So if you spend everything that comes in, right, then I call it the MC Hammer maneuver, right, after the pop star who went bankrupt after making like $40 million in the 80s. But anyway, so you can be anxious earner, but maybe an avoidant saver, or you can be an anxious investor, but an avoidant giver. And so it's about helping you identify what your money monsters are, according to your Enneagram type, and then giving you really practical tools on how to overcome them and heal your childhood wounds, so you have a healthier relationship to yourself first and foremost, so then you can have a healthier relationship to your money and the world around you.
All right. Is it possible to go through the 9 types and just name the money monsters?
Sure. Let me just grab my cheat sheet real quick here so I can get it right. So you've got the money monsters. So for those who are familiar, for the 8, we'll start with type 8, if you will. So we've got what I call the detonator and the dominator. So the detonator would be an avoidant type 8 who kind of blows up prudent financial limitations. They don't want to be controlled by a budget. They don't want to be controlled by any limitations in their spending. So they don't tend to avoid money per se. They tend to avoid the limitations it puts on them. They tend to blow them up in their need to be in charge or feel important, or basically have control over their environment. And they don't want the money to limit their ability to control what's going on around them, so they can get themselves into financial trouble that way. Or they can be what I call the dominator, the money anxious type. That would be if you ever see the TV show Succession, or things like that, where you see a type 8 really using money as a kind of a weaponizing it to dominate and control the people around them and their circumstances. So that's a quick overview of the 8. We can go deeper into that if you want, or just keep going around the circle.
No, let's keep going, because I think we have all types on here, so I think it'd be so interesting for people to hear this.
Yeah.
All right. And then so for type 9, the peacemaker, we've got the spud and the dud. So the spud is sort of the couch potato, right? Who just never gets off the couch. Their sloth overcomes them and they never really get their act together. They could be taking action, but they don't want to deal with the conflict that their finances are creating. So they just everything's kind of the spud. Or the dud would be the type 9 who has that flurry of activity. They're doing a lot, but they don't really ever want to confront the core issues because they're afraid of the conflict that's going to arise. And so they do a lot, but their actions tend to be a bit of a dud because they're never really getting to the heart of the matter and want to resolve the conflicts that might create. And then going around to type 1, I've got the prude and the pious. So the prude would be someone who's money avoidant. So as you know, ones have this compulsive need to be good and they feel perfect and not defective in what they're doing. And so what the prude kind of tends to do is, since is a one who's maybe not good at dealing with money. And so instead of facing their issues, they tend to demonize money rather than feeling bad about themselves for their lack of financial acumen. So they kind of have this prudish sort of mentality towards money, and kind of put their wallet in a chastity belt and treat money like it's the devil's pocket lint. So they kind of pushing money away because they think it's unconsciously evil or dirty or defective, or it's going to corrupt them. And then on the other side, we've got the anxious one, which would be the pious, which is really that hyper fixation. Every I's got to be dotted, every T's got to be crossed. Their budget's like the perfect spreadsheets, and they can get a lot really angry and frustrated when their budget gets out of whack, or there's certain circumstances where maybe a little more compassion and kindness might be more warranted, rather than being so hyper fixated on perfection that they don't find any joy. Or instead of using money as a tool for love and service, maybe their sort of anal retentiveness maybe is causing suffering for themselves and the people around them. So that's sort of the anger triad in a nutshell. Then we can go around to type 2. We've got the bleeder and the bonder. So the bleeder is the avoidant type 2, who's always bleeding their money out in service to their time and their talent in service to others, without really ever taking control of their finances for themselves and meeting they're so busy meeting everybody else's needs that they neglect their own. And so that would be type 2. But then there's what I call the bonder, which is the money anxious 2. And that's the type 2. There's that sort of adage, it's better to teach a man to fish. And the bonder type 2 is the one who would rather give someone a fish every single day with a side of tartar sauce and you're an amazing note, rather than really teach them how to fish, because they want that constant stream of gratitude and accolades that are coming back to them. So they kind of can create kind of an indentured servitude in a way in the people around them through their giving and through their gifts and through their generosity, but because there's all these strings attached to it, essentially, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not unconditional love, it's conditional love, because they want that gratitude always. That love me, love me, love me.
I like to say it's calculated love versus altruistic.
There you go. Nailed it. And then type 3, which I'm of course very familiar with. We've got the barrier and the blinger. So the barrier would be the type 3 which is how I kind of am sometimes, is like the ostrich who wants to bury their head in the sand and doesn't want to look at it, because all the shame and all the sadness and grief that they feel around money, the money anxiety they have, it's like it triggers all their shame and it triggers all their fears. So they tend to just avoid it and push it away and not want to look at it. And that, of course, creates all kinds of suffering. And then there's the blinger, which is the type 3. So my dad was a blinger and I'm a barrier, which is kind of interesting. So I kind of inherited my type 3 from my dad, but we express it in different ways. But the blinger is the kind of person who wants to have all the fancy house, the fancy watch, the great cars, the clothes, right? So they're blinging out their life in order to. So status symbols are a great way, or a cheap form of grace. It's a way to get validation and approval, people think, from society and the people around them by having all these, look at me, 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 look at all the things I have. So that's the blinger, but they may spend more than they have coming in, or they're not investing or saving appropriately because they're so busy on the status symbols that their wealth can buy
it's so funny, Doug, you should mention that, because I was just thinking the other day about a guy. So I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut for 40 years, and I grew up there. It's the home of Wall Street wealth. It's the place. And in fact, I think at one time it had more hedge funds than any other location in the world. We're actually in this little town. It's only like 60,000 people, right?
Wow.
But I knew I had this friend of mine, and he came to me one day in distress, and he lived in a beautiful house in Bellhaven, which is this beautiful community right on the water in Greenwich. You see the skyline of Manhattan in the distance. He lived in a beautiful home, and he was 3, like 3 with a 3 wing and a 3. Like if there was a subtype for 3, I mean, it's just crazy.
Yep.
And we went for a walk at the beach. And I said, "Well, what's going on with you?" He says, "I have no money." And I said, "You have no money?" Like at the time, he was working he was like a partner at Bear Stearns this was pre-2008, sure. Right?
Sure.
And I was like, how is it you can have, what? Like, he's got to be making north of $3 million a year, I'm guessing at that time, Yeah. And he said, what comes in goes right out. And he said between 3 homes, all of our kids in private school, car leases, staff in our house, you name it. He said, he says, I figured it out that at the end of the month, I literally only have about $700 left.
Yep.
And I was like, you only have $700 left at the end of the month? He's like, that's it. And he said, and I'm broke.
Yeah.
That was amazing to me. So there's a blinger for you.
Right. Like sell a couple of houses, man. What are you doing with all of it? What do you need it for?
Well, the problem is the fear that other people would interpret that as, oh, he's going under.
Ah, right.
And so he would lose all the validation.
Yep.
It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So, all right, fours. Anthony and I are fours.
Yeah.
All right.
You got
so
two
we'll
fours in the room. A self-pressed four, and we don't know what four yet. But come at us.
All right. So for fours, I got the flop and the flinger. So the flop is the avoidant type four who just, when they talk about their financial life, it's like,
we're done now.
Yeah.
We're done now. Anthony and I. Anthony and I are done right now, I think. Anthony, are you feeling what I'm feeling right now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are you feeling the shame? Is it coming up for you? Is like it's coming up for me? Like I'm actually turning red right now.
Oh, how's the water, Papa? 5 feet high and rising.
Yep.
All right, go on with the flop. We're ready. We're ready.
Like you can hear them face planting on the pavement, a giant flop in their financial life because they're so rebellious of all the conventions of the basics of finance, of budgeting and saving and investing. It's pretty conventional stuff. You kind of got to follow some really basic rules around it. And the rebellious nature of the nines that do it my way, they end up pushing money away, and they often think that there's something even noble or romantic about poverty and living outside the bounds of society and doing it their own way. And so that often causes a lot of trouble for them because they don't want to play by the rules. And some of those rules are there for a reason. And so it's hard for us sometimes to really, my twin brothers are 4 and my older brothers are 4. So I got a 4 wing. So I get it. I do. So it's really hard for sometimes for 4s.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's hard for 4s with money sometimes too is that the topic seems pedestrian.
Yes.
Right. It's like, this is for those people. But people as special as I am should not have to trouble themselves with matters of money. Right.
Exactly.
And so there's a kind of it's actually a funny kind of elitism. Right. Yeah. Like I am above this conversation.
Right. It's an ego boost, right? It's a way of inflating your ego and feeling superior to others because you're above it all. But we're not. Nobody's above money. Money makes the world go round. And if you push it away or reject it for the wrong reasons, it's like whacking yourself on the thumb with a hammer. Like it's a self-inflicted wound that you don't need to be, need to maybe try to get over a bit. And then
what's the other one? The flop and the what?
Flinger. The flinger.
Yeah.
So the flinger. So you can be jumbled. You can be anxious in one area and avoid another. But the flinger is the 4 who's maybe either hyper concerned about money, or whenever money comes in, they tend to fling it at forms of self-expression, or something that make them stand out and feel unique. Right? Whether it's there are whatever that is for you. What's your vice, Ian? What do you spend money on that just...
Golly whiz. Well, I'm just recognizing here that I'm in the world of attachment theory, I'm disorganized when it comes to the money issues. I am actually both of these things. There is a part of me, and some of them are stage dependent, right? Like as flingers, I mean, Anthony, think about the cars I've owned.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and the guitars I've owned.
Yeah. That's gear. For sure.
Oh, golly, expensive. And then on the other hand, I'm a flop. And part of that isn't entirely type related. I just grew up with so many crazy messages about money. So, I mean, just insane messages about money. And we went from having tons of money and living on Cadogan or Eaton Square in London and, in Knightsbridge, and just this beautiful, like upstairs, downstairs kind of life, to having nothing. Right. And then going back up again and then coming back down. It was all over the map with a crazy dad, but also just the cultural messages around money. And I actually feel like first of all, they didn't teach me anything about money. Zip. My parents taught me
same
nothing
Same for
about
me.
money. They taught me all the worst things you could teach a kid about money.
Yep.
Right.
Got all the wrong
and
messages.
it's just, yeah. And then because I was an artist, right, there was this kind of not disdain for money because you wanted, but that wasn't the currency that really attracted me. What felt like income to me or compensation was seeing the difference that my art or my work was making in other people's lives. And I just sort of saw that as all the, remuneration I needed. It's not until I got older where you realize, oh crap, I probably need to deal with money. And so that had to come to me later in life.
Yeah.
Hey friends, the Enneagram is a remarkably powerful tool for improving relationships. Whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, understanding the people around you is critical to building better relationships. The Enneagram provides a framework for understanding different perspectives and communication styles. Imagine knowing why your colleague reacts defensively in meetings or why your partner needs space when they're stressed. Understanding these dynamics helps you navigate both your inner world and your relationships with more empathy, patience, and compassion. It's like having a cheat sheet for human behavior. Don't know your type? Well, find out today with my new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. And be sure to enter the discount code Typology Podcast on the checkout page to take 10% off your assessment. Go to typologyinstitute.com/assessment.
Well, we all have our struggles. I mean, as you know, every type's got its own struggles. Nobody. There's no suffering-free path in life. We all have our issues to overcome. And
I am acutely aware of these things. Anthony, are you a flopper or a flinger?
I had both of those.
Yeah,
just
you're
like
another
you, yeah.
disorganized type.
Yeah,
I'm so.
I am. Yeah.
Oh man, we're a mess. We need outside help.
Yeah.
well, happy to be of assistance if I can.
All right, good. All right, let's go on to fives.
Right. And I've got a book for you guys. All right. So for fives, I've got the moot and the miser. So the moot is like someone who thinks that money is irrelevant. They just don't want to deal with it. The five wants to just live in their head and live in the world of ideas and abstraction. And they just kind of live a very minimalist lifestyle. They just, everything's, super just basic. And they just want to they just don't want to deal with money. And so they tend to, they just think it's not important. And so they just don't deal with it. And they're going to live a very frugal, minimalist lifestyle. And, that can be okay to a point, but that can create all kinds of suffering for them if they're not careful about it. And then you've got the miser, which is sort of the Ebenezer Scrooge. It's the hyper fixated on money, like that really where that avarice really takes hold of them and they become hoarders of wealth and they have a hard time letting go of their resources or their time or their talent or their ideas, right? They don't just letting a lot out. Stuff comes in, very little comes out. And that could be financial, of course, but also, as you know, emotional and intellectual as well. So that's the two types for the five in a nutshell.
So it's interesting because I have lots of five friends for some reason, and I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for that particular personality style. But I have one friend who lives in a very, Anthony, you've actually met this guy. This is a guy who lives in maybe a 1,200 square foot house in Rhode Island, buys all of his clothes at Target. His house is just, kind of littered with funny things that he collects, right? Mm-hmm. But he is incredibly frugal, mm-hmm. right? And a multi-millionaire. Like I don't know where it's kept. I don't even know if it's just in a Passport savings bank somewhere. Literally, I think he like I've never heard him talk about investments, but I do know that he is a multi-millionaire, and I do think he's generous to certain things, but otherwise he has a strange relationship with money. Quite strange. And he's the kind of guy that you're going to read about in the New York Post one day, because this is the thing the Post loves. They're going to say this, like that woman in New York who was the billionaire and gave all of her money to the medical school. I can't remember which medical school it was. Yep. Was it Albert Einstein? I can't remember the school. and living kind of modestly, and just one day he dies and everybody finds out he just gave $5 million to his boarding school that he went to. It'd be something like that. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's 5. All right. Yeah. So it's a money monster that needs to kind of be tamed, to maybe be overcome. So maybe you could live. Maybe it'd be nice to use some of that wealth now and put it in service. I mean, great that they donate at the end. That's awesome. I mean, that's fantastic. But maybe there's a healthier middle way where they could enjoy life a little bit.
No doubt. All right, 6s. Oh boy, this is going to be interesting.
Right, so 6s are complicated ones, as you know. They're tough. So you've got the money avoidant. I would say call them the paralyzed. They just there's all this committee of voices in their head. They don't know which way to go to turn, and so they kind of get stuck in decision paralysis, kind of like a deer in the headlights. And so they have a hard time making decisions, and then their financial life can kind of deteriorate from there because they're kind of stuck in this anxiety all the time of what do I do, and second guessing themselves and not being sure. Especially if they're financially illiterate, that's a real hard part of the problem with a lot of people with their money issues is they just don't know the lingo or the language of basic financial literacy, and that's what the first book is about. So, From Monk to Money Manager is kind of a how-to book. How do you manage your finances? How do you tackle the basics of earning, saving, investing, giving, taxes, insurance, all the kind of nuts and bolts. And now Taming Your Money Monster is really about the psychological, like why do you make the same kind of crazy mistakes over and over again? But so that's to be the paralyzed for the 6, avoidant 6. And then if they're money anxious, I call them the puppet or the pugilist. So they kind of this Jekyll and Hyde kind of mentality. They flip back and forth. So the puppet is one who's just going to follow convention diligently. They're going to follow the rules. They're going to maybe want to embed themselves in a corporation or a system or some structure, clergy or military, where they feel really safe and secure. They've got a strong network around them that's going to give them, it can give them a solid financial future, but they're kind of puppets on a string, essentially dancing to the tune of what's going on around them. But then if that gets dented in some way, or there's tragedy strike or some random event happens that can sort of blow a hole in their budget or whatever, that kind of throws them off track, then they can flip over to what I call the pugilist, which is an old-fashioned term for a boxer. They're going to lash out and really kind of try to get that security that they're so looking for back. And so that's the money anxious for the type 6.
Yeah, that sounds like the counterphobic 6.
Yeah.
Right.
More in that particular domain. Yeah, 6s are complicated on these sorts of matters. All right.
Okay.
Bring it home.
7.
Let's talk about 7s.
7s, we've got the gorger and the grabber. So the gorger would be sort of like the prodigal son, right? They're just gorging themselves. Whatever comes in, it goes out, right? They don't have a lot of impulse control. If there's something shiny and new, got to have it. New vacation, let's do it. New restaurant, let's go check it out. Right? They're living in that FOMO all the time of fear of missing out. So they're grabbing at all the opportunities and experiences around them, and perhaps letting their financial life deteriorate as a result of that. And then you've got the grabber, which is, again, because 7s are so living in fear of pain or privation. So they're trying to grab all the resources and hoard them so they can sort of avoid any sort of pain or privation that a lack of money might produce. So they don't want to. So yeah, that would be the 2 types for the 7.
Nice. I got a 7. I got a 7 son. And what category would I put him in? He also may be a disorganized both and type. But he's young and he's actually on a good journey, I think, right now with finances. But part of what drove that was personal life crisis, sort of a wake up to adulthood in every domain of his life, at 27 years old. And the other day he called and basically said to me, Dad, this must be his 6th wing. He's like, I just want to work for the city of San Francisco because they have great benefits and, great pension. And I'm like, you're 27, you're already thinking about a pension. And I'm like, but the part of this is, just some of his anxiety. But also it's his generation. I think this generation thinks way differently about money than I did.
Yeah. How so?
Well, like I have a bunch of millennial kids, right? So they're 27, 30, and 33. And some of them are financially very successful and some of them are not, right? They're kind of all over the map. But one thing is for sure, they don't think about work and money the way that I did. Like I went to college in the Northeast, and then, the expectation was you followed a certain path. and you bought into a certain script. And the script was you go to college, then you go to work for Goldman Sachs, and then you stay at Goldman Sachs for 3 or 4 years. Then they pay for you to go to Harvard Business School. And in return, you go back there for a minimum of 5 years. And then you stay with them until you hopefully can retire at 38 because you're starting to run out of energy. You've got maybe 1 or 2 little kids, and the 23-year-olds coming up behind you want your job.
Right.
So, and they're actually out to kill you. Literally, they're out to kill you. And so your job is to get out the door by, at before 40 with enough money to not have to think about money again. That literally was the script that I was raised around. Like, that's what you do. My kids want nothing to do with that. And a lot of their friends don't either. They didn't want to work for Wall Street. They want to have jobs that have meaning, that have a transcendent purpose. They don't want to work 90 hours a week like my peers did, in investment banking or in some other job like that. They don't want to sell their soul out to the man. I mean, that's the kind of thing so it's just a whole different mindset. And in fact, going to good schools is more of a strike against you now. And
really?
You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah, kind of. Like, I have a kid who went to Brown. I have a kid who went to Middlebury. And they're like, I think sometimes they're almost embarrassed with their peers to say where they went.
Wow. That's wild.
Because partly because in the world, they're also out in California. Part of that world is in tech. It's like they don't really care where you went. They just don't care. Are you competent?
What can you do for me? Yeah, that's all that matters.
They don't really. So it doesn't have the same social capital that it used to have.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I kind of think that's a good thing, actually, in a funny way, that it kind of democratizes things.
Yeah. If you got talent and you work hard, you can succeed. And it doesn't really matter whether you have fancy degrees or not.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Welcome to the W, where elite athletes are redefining the game of basketball. From buzzer-beating shots, jaw-dropping defense, and logo threes, the WNBA delivers nonstop action and world-class talent every game. These athletes don't just play the game, they elevate it. The biggest stars, the brightest stage. AT&T WNBA All-Star 2025 comes to Indianapolis July 18th through 19th. Tune into the game July 19th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC.
Now I'd like to introduce you to Meaningful Beauty, the famed skincare brand created by iconic supermodel Cindy Crawford. It's her secret to absolutely gorgeous skin. Meaningful Beauty makes powerful and effective skincare simple, and it's loved by millions of women. It's formulated for all ages and all skin tones and types, and it's designed to work as a complete skincare system, leaving your skin feeling soft, smooth, and nourished. I recommend starting with Cindy's full regimen, which contains all 5 of her best-selling products, including the amazing youth-activating Melon Serum. This next-generation serum has the power of melon leaf stem cell technology. It's melon leaf stem cells encapsulated for freshness and released onto the skin to support a visible reduction in the appearance of wrinkles. With thousands of glowing 5-star reviews, why not give it a try? Subscribe today and you can get the amazing Meaningful Beauty system for just $49.95. That includes our introductory 5-piece system, free gifts, free shipping, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. All of that available at meaningfulbeauty.com.
Well, man, this has been a really rich conversation. And I'm curious, just in wrapping it up, you were talking about, we've gone through the money monsters and how the Enneagram, as integrated with attachment theory, has, provided you with this lens into the kinds of things that each type needs to address in their inner world in order to have a healthy relationship with money and finances, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In terms of their inner life, what does the book offer them outside of like a goal or a vision of a life inside that's different than the one they're having right now?
Yeah. Well, I think you really enjoy reading it because I've really laid out the shadow structure for each of the 9 Enneagram types, really detailed kind of a Jungian perspective on what are the different building blocks that allow our ego to grow and form in the first half of life. And then how do we move into the second half of life, and to sort of our enlightenment structure that each type has, the path that each one has to really finding that deep inner peace that's going to allow them to have more security in all aspects of their life, but especially in their finances. And you might just check out the type 4. Maybe just there's a chapter on type 4. Maybe give that a quick skim and see how that resonates with you. But
well, I don't know if I want to, Doug. I don't know if I want to. I've already heard about the flop and the flinger, and I just want to say that I so identify with both that it may be a little bit too much. I want the truth, but not too much truth.
But there's also the money masters, which we haven't talked about. So there's a money mastery for each type. So that's really where the book is trying to get you to. So for the type 4, the money master, I call you the flame, right? So you burn bright without burning out. And I've also changed a lot of the Enneagram terminology, and I've re-envisioned the holy ideas. I call them your sacred gifts. So the sacred gift for the 4 is divine glory. It's like, how do you bring the glory of the divine, the beauty, the truth that you so intuitively see that the rest of us don't? And how do you bring that to the world in love and service? This is your kind of your cosmic superpower, and teaching people how to find that inside themselves. What is that sacred gift that we each have or called to express according to our type? And then what is the path exactly to that? What are the actual steps you need to take in order to be the healthy expression of your type?
Ooh, that's yummy.
I like that.
I love the sound of that. Anthony, get a copy of this book and then tell me what I need to do. Just tell me what I need to
myself.
do. Oh my gosh.
I'll send you guys a copy here after the call. I'll just email you a copy, and you guys can give it a skim when you have a chance. But I think you're going to find a lot of radical new ideas in the book. Like if you're an Enneagram purist, you might need a stress ball before you read it. But for those who with a more open mind, I think you're going to find that it cleans up a lot of confusion, I think, that there is around how and why the Enneagram works, and just to make it a little more linear and concrete for those of us who need that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing I love about the Enneagram is its flexibility. Unlike other systems, like if you're a Jungian analyst or if you're a cognitive behavioral therapist, those systems are fairly concrete now, right? There are some established terms, established ideas. You just don't screw with it. It's like, but the Enneagram kind of sometimes in a weird way invites innovation and different ways of playing with it. And yes, there are Enneagram fundamentalists, but as you know, there's fundamentalists in every domain of life. And so I just tend to move away from those folks. And so I welcome new and innovative ways of thinking about the Enneagram and how it can...
Because at the end of the day, the Enneagram really what it is, it's the physics of consciousness. It really explains how consciousness develops in an individual human being. And there's only so many ways you can design an ego and have it work. And so it's sort of, there's infinite variety inside the Enneagram, of course, but really understanding the mechanics of how an ego is formed and then how you get the healthiest expression of that ego is so powerful, and it's so useful for people. And so hopefully that lays it out. And like any system like physics or math, it's never done. Like you're never gonna exhaust the Enneagram. There's no bottom to it. Like it's got this infinite complexity. So it's always open and ripe for exploration and innovation.
We had a number of shows. I do a lot of work with internal family systems, and we've loved these conversations we've had around the integration of internal family systems and the Enneagram, thinking of parts as types, and this sort of, and I'm like, oh, this is so juicy. It's so interesting, right? Like how it can all play together, and all of them are imperfect models, but they're really good models to start with. And for thinking about the interior architecture of people, it's really, really satisfying work. All right, everybody. So your next task, folks, is to go out and get Doug Lynam's new book, Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram. Doug, how do people learn about you?
You can go to my website, douglynam.com, DOUGLYN as in Nicholas, AM as in Michael.com. You can find all the resources you need there, and you can also just Google Taming Your Money Monster. It's available on booksellers everywhere.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show. Anthony, you're a flop.
You're a flame.
He's a flame.
Gosh, thank you so much. And everybody out there, you are loved. And we wish you love and joy and peace and healing and rest this week. Can't wait till we're with you again next week. Until then, goodbye.